The HOA president literally screamed that my legally purchased cabin was her son's inheritance. What she didn't know. I'd already found the 1873 land grant proving I owned half the valley and her family had been squatting illegally for 50 years. Picture this. I'm chainsawing rotted boards off my beautiful 150-year-old cabin when this white Mercedes screeches up my dirt road. Out storms Delilah Thornwick, 50-something, blonde highlights, face red as a steamed crab. Stop. You're destroying Bradley's birthright. I kill the chainsaw engine. The sudden silence hung thick, broken only by her ragged breathing and the sweet scent of fresh-cut pine drifting between us. Lady, I bought this place fair and square. Fair and square, I repeated, slower this time. She actually laughed. Some county auction doesn't erase a century of family history. Poor Delilah. She had no idea that basement document would cost her everything. What would you do if some entitled Karen tried stealing your property? Drop your location below. Bet your town's got similar horror stories. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in this mess. My name's Marcus Holloway. I'm 45, and 6 months ago, my life imploded spectacularly. 20-year marriage gone. Suburban dream house sold to pay divorce lawyers who charged more per hour than I made in a day. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom, sometimes it's exactly where you find your footing. My grandfather, rest his soul, always said, Marcus, work with your hands and you'll never starve. He taught me carpentry when I was 12, showed me how to read wood grain like scripture. When he passed, he left me his tools and $37,000 with a note that said, build something that matters. So there I was, scrolling county auction listings at 2 a.m., half drunk on instant coffee and regret, when I found her, a gorgeous 1873 log cabin estate on 15 acres in Millbrook Valley, population 847. A town where old money and new McMansions glare at each other across picket fences. The photo showed chestnut logs weathered by time but proud, sitting on a stone foundation like a monument. The place had history, and pain. When I did the preview walkthrough, the musty smell of old timber hit me like a memory. These weren't just logs. They were hand-hewn beams, thick as my waist, joined by craftsmanship you couldn't fake. I ran my fingers along the grooves, feeling every strike of the chisel like the heartbeat of a man who built it by lantern light. Auction day was chaos. My bid, $47,000, beat out some preppy kid in a BMW who kept texting, probably begging mommy for more money. I walked away with the deed, a clean title, and the kind of pride I hadn't felt in years. But the cabin had secrets. You could feel it in the silence. The way the forest stood around it, too still, too aware. My neighbor, an old man with nicotine fingers, had muttered when I moved in, that cabin's been trouble since the war. I laughed it off. Should have listened. 2 days after I started cleaning up, I noticed something strange. Every time I parked my truck, someone would move the private property sign a few feet deeper into the woods. One night, I caught a glimpse of headlights lingering at the edge of my drive, engine running. The next morning, boot prints led up to my porch, and a dead crow lay on the steps. Then came Delilah. HOA president. Widow of Charles Thornwick, the man who used to manage this valley's land titles. Her voice carried the kind of authority you don't earn, you inherit. She jabbed a manicured finger toward my cabin. That's my son's land. You can't just waltz in here and... I bought it, I said. From who? She snapped. From the county. At auction. Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Something like fear. Then she recovered. You'll regret this, Mr. Holloway. That place belongs to Thornwicks. Always has. She drove off, tires spitting gravel, leaving me in a cloud of dust and pine. I watched her go, heart pounding. Because here's the thing, she wasn't entirely wrong. The Thornwicks had lived here, for generations. But what Delilah didn't know was that I'd already found something in that damp stone basement, tucked behind a rotted beam, a rolled parchment sealed with wax, dated 1873, signed by President Ulysses S. Grant himself. A land grant deed. And my family name was on it. I didn't sleep that night. That parchment, the 1873 land grant, sat on my workbench under a single lamp, edges trembling in the draft. The signature was faint, the ink brown and brittle with age, but my name, Holloway, was clear as sunrise. My great-great-grandfather, Samuel Holloway, had been granted ownership of half the Millbrook Valley by the federal government. Half the valley. So why had I grown up believing my family came from nothing? Why had no one ever mentioned this place? I thought about Delilah's words, "That's my son's inheritance." The arrogance in her voice wasn't just pride, it was fear disguised as power. Something in her bloodline depended on keeping this land. The next morning, I went down to the cabin's basement. It wasn't much, dirt floor, low ceiling, a single dangling bulb. But the walls told stories. Every timber bore the scars of axes, nails, and time. My grandfather used to say wood remembers everything it touches. While scraping off mold from the far wall, my chisel hit something hollow. The sound was different, a dull echo instead of solid thud. I pried at the spot, heart thumping. A small section of paneling broke loose, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside were two rusted tin boxes, both sealed tight with age. The first held old letters, maybe a dozen, written in elegant, looping script. The second box was heavier. I cracked it open and found an oilskin pouch, inside of which lay a half-burnt map and a photograph so faded it looked like a ghost. The photo showed 3 men in front of my cabin, one holding a surveyor's rod, another wearing a Union uniform, and the third bore my face. Or close enough to make my skin crawl. My great-great-grandfather Samuel. The letters were addressed to him, from someone named Eleanor T., each dated between 1874 and 1878. The first few were love letters, tender, hopeful. But they darkened quickly. By the last one, Eleanor's handwriting was desperate. "They say your claim means nothing, that Thornwick has powerful friends. Please, Samuel, do not return to the cabin. They will not let you keep it." I sat on the cold floor, the air thick with rot and dust, and for the first time since buying this place, I felt something I hadn't expected, grief. My ancestor had built this land with his hands and lost it to deceit. And now, a century and a half later, his bloodline had unknowingly bought it back. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, a black SUV pulled up near the edge of my property. 2 men in suits stepped out, scanning the cabin like it offended them. I walked outside, wiping sawdust from my hands. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Holloway?" one asked. "That's right." He handed me a paper. "From the Millbrook Valley Homeowners Association. You're in violation of several neighborhood covenants, unapproved construction, excessive noise, and unauthorized land use." I stared at the notice. "There's no HOA out here. This isn't even a subdivision." He smirked. "Technically, all of Millbrook Valley falls under our jurisdiction. President Delilah Thornwick has requested immediate compliance." "Compliance," I repeated. "You can tell Delilah she can shove her compliance." Their smiles faded. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Holloway. Mrs. Thornwick doesn't take kindly to defiance." They left without another word. The crickets filled the silence after their engine faded into the trees. That night, the wind howled through the cracks in the cabin walls like a warning. Around midnight, I heard footsteps on my porch, slow, deliberate. I grabbed my flashlight and eased toward the door. No one there. But the letters I'd left on the table, the ones from Eleanor, were gone. And in their place, a new envelope sat neatly beside the lamp. The paper was creamy white, embossed with gold letters. Millbrook Valley Homeowners Association, Notice of Eviction. Scrawled in pen at the bottom was a single line, written in a familiar, furious hand. "Leave before you dig up more ghosts, Mr. Holloway." By morning, the eviction notice sat where I'd left it, but the handwriting was gone. The ink, once scrawled across the bottom, had somehow faded to blank parchment overnight. I didn't imagine it. I'd stared at that message for hours, tracing each threatening word. Something, or someone, wanted me off this land. I drove into town to talk to the county clerk, hoping to get clarity about this so-called HOA. Millbrook Valley was a postcard town, neat lawns, white fences, and the kind of fake smiles that cracked when you looked too long. Inside the courthouse, a middle-aged clerk squinted at my deed. "Millbrook Valley Homeowners Association," she repeated. "Never heard of it." I frowned. "Then why are they issuing legal notices?" She looked around, lowered her voice. "Delilah Thornwick runs that outfit like her personal kingdom. It's not official. More like a club for the old families who think they still own this valley." "Do they?" I asked. Her lips tightened. "Depends on how scared you are of the Thornwicks." When I got back to the cabin, my gate was open. My tools, the same ones my grandfather left me, were scattered in the mud. A window shattered. And burned into the bark of the oak by my driveway were two words, carved deep with a blade. "Go home." I wasn't the kind to scare easy, but something about that message, the raw hate behind it, crawled under my skin. That night, I called the sheriff. He didn't even come out. Just sighed through the phone. "Marcus, I'd leave it be. Folks here don't like outsiders stirring up history." "History?" I asked. He paused. "Let's just say the Thornwicks have long memories." Click. Dial tone. The next few days blurred into work. I poured myself into restoring the cabin, hammer, sandpaper, varnish. Every board I fixed felt like defiance. The place started breathing again. I patched the roof, rebuilt the porch, and found old initials carved into one of the beams, S.H. My ancestor. Samuel Holloway. That night, a storm rolled in. Thunder cracked through the valley, rain hammering the tin roof. As lightning flashed, I saw her, Delilah, standing at the edge of my property under a black umbrella, watching. I stepped outside, rain soaking through my shirt. "You lost something?" I yelled over the wind. She didn't move. Didn't blink. Just called back, "You don't understand what you've done. That land was never meant to be yours." I took a step forward. "You mean it was never meant to be taken from us?" Her eyes narrowed, voice trembling. "You think your family was innocent? You have no idea what happened here." Lightning split the sky, and for an instant I saw something in her face, not anger, but terror. She turned and hurried to her car, tires spitting mud as she disappeared down the road. I stood there for a long time, heart pounding. When I went back inside, I found the oilskin pouch on my table, the one I'd locked in a chest, wide open. The map was gone. The next morning, I got a letter in the mail from a law firm I'd never heard of, Thornwick and Abel, attorneys at law. Inside was a formal declaration claiming the land's ownership remains under active dispute due to unresolved historical transfers. But what chilled me most wasn't the letter. It was the signature at the bottom, Bradley Thornwick. Delilah's son. The one she claimed I'd stolen the inheritance from. That night, I decided to dig. Literally. Behind the cabin, near the stone well, there was a patch of earth that always seemed wrong. Softer. As if it had been turned over once too often. I grabbed my shovel, the rain starting to fall again. Each strike against the soil echoed through the valley. I dug until metal scraped metal, a rusted box, locked tight. I pried it open, breath shaking. Inside was a ledger, wrapped in rotting cloth, and a silver badge bearing the words, U.S. Land Office, 1875. But the last page of the ledger stopped my heart cold. Written in ink dark as blood. Property reassigned to Thornwick Estate following disappearance of claimant Samuel Holloway. Cause, unresolved conflict. Disappearance. Not death. Not surrender. Disappearance. And just below that, a second signature, faint but legible, Charles Thornwick. Delilah's late husband. The man who managed land titles. The same man whose family had stolen mine. I barely slept. That ledger sat open on the kitchen table, pages fluttering in the draft like whispers of the dead. My great-great-grandfather hadn't vanished, he'd been erased. The Thornwicks had turned theft into legacy, and the town had swallowed their lie for a century and a half. By sunrise, I knew what I had to do. I drove back to town, ledger and land grant locked in a metal case on the passenger seat. I walked straight into the Millbrook County Courthouse and asked for the public records clerk. Her name was Janice, same woman as before. When I laid the parchment and ledger before her, she froze. "Where did you find this?" "Under my cabin," I said. "Hidden." She flipped through the brittle pages with trembling fingers. "These are government records, 19th century land logs. These shouldn't even exist outside the archives." Then someone made sure they didn't. She nodded slowly. "Marcus, this could change everything. If this is authentic, the Thornwicks never owned the valley legally. You could challenge every deed they've filed since 1875. Before I could speak, the courthouse doors slammed open. The echo rolled through the hall like thunder. Delilah Thornwick swept in, flanked by two lawyers in black suits. Her eyes found me instantly, blue ice burning with rage. "Mr. Holloway," she said, voice sweet as venom. "You've been very busy." I folded my arms. "Just digging up what your family buried." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "My family built this town. You think one piece of moldy parchment changes that?" One of her lawyers, tall, sharp-faced, stepped forward. "We'll be filing an injunction immediately. Those documents were unlawfully obtained from private property. You're in possession of stolen material." I laughed. "Private property? You mean my cabin? You people don't even know what law means." Delilah leaned close, her perfume heavy and artificial. "You're playing with ghosts, Marcus. This valley remembers blood. You should too." She turned and strode out, her heels clicking like gunshots on marble. By the end of the week, they'd filed every kind of complaint you could imagine: trespassing, noise violations, environmental damage. Each letter more absurd than the last. The HOA printed flyers labeling me a dangerous squatter. My mailbox filled with anonymous threats. Someone even spray-painted thief across my front gate. But I didn't back down. I hired a young lawyer from the next county, Renee Porter, the kind who still believed truth mattered. She spent nights scanning the land records, piecing together a web of forgery stretching back 5 generations. Then she found it, the smoking gun. In 1921, Charles Thornwick's grandfather had filed a renewal deed claiming ownership of Millbrook Valley. But the signature on the authorization line, supposedly from the U.S. Land Office, matched the handwriting in my ancestor's disappearance ledger. Charles Thornwick had forged a federal document. We brought everything to court. The case drew the whole town. Cameras, whispers, packed pews. On one side sat me and Renee, our evidence stacked in folders. On the other, Delilah and Bradley Thornwick, looking smug and righteous, like royalty defending a throne. Delilah testified first, spinning her story of family legacy, claiming I'd fabricated evidence to destroy her reputation. When it was my turn, I stood before the judge, palms sweating, holding that crumbling parchment. "This isn't just about land," I said. "It's about truth. My family built this valley before the Thornwicks ever laid claim to it. They didn't buy it, they buried it. I placed the 1873 deed on the bench, the seal glinting under fluorescent light. My ancestor disappeared after filing this grant. A government agent investigating the claim was never seen again. And here, I lifted the ledger, is the proof. Signed by Charles Thornwick himself. The room went silent. The judge adjusted his glasses, reading the faded ink. This appears authentic. If verified, these records could nullify every Thornwick title since 1875. Delilah's mask cracked. Her lips trembled, fury flashing behind her eyes. She stood abruptly. You have no idea what you're unleashing, Mr. Holloway. You think this is justice? You're stirring up a curse. Security moved toward her as she screamed, "You'll regret this. My family owns this valley." The judge banged his gavel. "Mrs. Thornwick, sit down." But she didn't. She stormed out of the courtroom, her son chasing behind her. The next day, the county issued a temporary injunction in my favor. For the first time, the land was legally mine, publicly, undeniably, forever. But that night, as I stood on my porch under a blood-red sunset, the valley felt wrong again. Still. Watching. Then I saw it, faint orange light flickering beyond the trees. The old Thornwick mansion, burning. By the time I reached the Thornwick estate, flames were clawing at the night sky. The old mansion stood on the hill like a ghost finally catching fire, its white columns glowing orange, roof collapsing in showers of sparks. The heat hit me before I even got out of the truck. Smoke curled across the valley, black against the moon. I could hear shouting, Delilah's voice, high and frantic, and Bradley yelling for water that would never come. I ran toward them, coughing, eyes stinging. "Delilah!" I shouted. She turned, wild-eyed, framed in firelight. "Stay back. This is your fault." "My fault?" I could barely hear myself over the crackle of timber. "You did this to yourself." The roof gave way with a roar, embers swirling around us like burning snow. Bradley grabbed his mother's arm, trying to pull her away, but she fought him off, screaming, "This house is ours. It's his." She pointed toward the flames, toward the heart of the blaze, and for a moment, I saw what she meant. Hanging above the doorway, half-burned, was an old portrait, a stern man in a 19th-century coat. Charles Thornwick's ancestor. The man who'd forged my family out of history. Then the portrait fell, swallowed by the fire. Bradley finally dragged Delilah down the hill. The volunteer fire trucks arrived minutes later, but it was too late. The mansion burned to its bones. I stood by my truck as rain began to fall, soft, cooling, like the valley itself had decided to wash everything clean. The next morning, the sheriff came by my cabin. He looked tired, hat in his hands. "Electrical fire, they're saying. Faulty wiring." He paused, meeting my eyes. "You and I both know that place didn't have power in half those rooms." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. A week later, the court made its final ruling. The Thornwick estate, and the land it sat on, was now part of my property. The judge cited fraudulent historical ownership and transferred all titles back to the Holloway line. 150 years too late. Delilah left town. No one saw her after the fire. Bradley stayed behind for a while, pale and broken, working odd jobs, avoiding my eyes when we passed in town. I didn't hate him. Truth be told, I pitied him. He'd been raised on a lie and watched it burn down in front of him. As for me, I rebuilt the cabin piece by piece, not as a monument, but as a promise. Every beam I set, every nail I drove, felt like reclaiming something stolen. During the restoration, I dug a small trench near the old well to lay drainage pipes. My shovel hit something solid, another small tin box, rusted through but still intact. Inside was a single item, a silver pocket watch, engraved with two initials, SH. Samuel Holloway. On the inside lid, a faint inscription read. To my blood and beyond. What's built in truth can never be buried. I stood there a long time, rain dripping from the brim of my hat, pocket watch in hand. The valley around me was quiet now. No more threats, no more footsteps at night. Just wind through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and ash, and something else. Peace. Sometimes I wonder if Delilah was right, if there really was a curse on this land. But maybe curses aren't supernatural. Maybe they're just the weight of lies carried for too many generations. I built a small workshop beside the cabin and started crafting again, furniture, beams, even toys for the kids from town. Word spread. They called it Holloway Timberworks. 6 months later, the first snowfall dusted the roof of the rebuilt cabin. I lit the wood stove, sat at the table, and opened my grandfather's old toolbox. The same one that started it all. Inside, beneath the worn chisels and nails, was his note, build something that matters. I smiled. I did, Grandpa, I whispered. And I finally built it on truth. Outside, the valley slept under the snow, whole again. And for the first time in a century and a half, the land finally belonged to the right name.